Hi, everybody. I am your host, Mike Downer, and welcome to the Integrator Arena Podcast with Brian Wirtz. Brian is a retired Marine who has transitioned into the entrepreneurial world as a fractional integrator for companies running on EOS. Brian now helps others do the same. How are we doing today, Brian?
Doing great, Mike. Beautiful, warm, very warm day in sunny Southern California. And I bet you're probably experiencing a little bit of the same.
A little bit of the same. We're at 95, feels like a little over 100. How about you guys?
A little bit less than that, upper 80s, low 90s right now. So, but definitely, it's summertime.
It is. It's what it is, and it's summertime, and that's what you expect. So,
exactly.
Today we're going to be talking about why a development continuum matters. So, what I'd like you to do is introduce the concept that becoming a winning integrator is an intentional development journey rather than a destination. So, I'll have you explain why every integrator benefits from understanding where they are today, what comes next, and how broader experience accelerates growth. So, Brian, let me ask you this. If winning integrators are intentionally developed, why is it important to think about development as a continuum rather than simply gaining experience?
Well, I view those two things very differently. We gain experience every day of our lives. We do new things. Some of the things, or sometimes we do the same things that we've done before, but we do them again. So sometimes we learn and develop in how we do things. But experiences don't necessarily mean growth, right? We get older, and we can just look around at our peers. No matter how old we are, we can see there's some people in life that are the same age as us that are doing more than we are doing because they've just been able to pack more in, and they're just they've grown more. And then there's other people that are the same age as us, and I'm not meaning this in a bad way, but maybe they haven't gotten as much out of their experiences. And so we've all lived the same amount of life experience. We've all done the same amount of years and time on the planet, but we don't all get the same thing out of those years. So having a continuum for growth is a way to be more intentional about our development. If we want to actually develop ourselves, develop certain skills, and have the capacity to do more tomorrow than we do today, or more 3 months, a year from now than we do today, we should be very intentional about it. And having a continuum to get us from point A to where our final destination is, no matter how far we want to grow, just gives us a chance to break it down into manageable chunks so that we actually have a better chance of getting there. It's a lot less daunting to try and get to an end state if we understand how to get there. And I would say the flip side of that is it's also more realistic that if we want to grow, that we're actually growing on a path than just thinking those repeated days of our lives are actually going to get us there. Sometimes the experience does, but sometimes the experience doesn't if we don't know how to package it and learn from it.
Oh, that makes complete sense. So, Brian, tell me this. Why isn't our own personal experience enough to become the best integrator we can be?
Well, I can speak for myself, and especially in the first company I was in the integrator seat. That was my sole source of information. That was my sole source of data on what being an integrator looked like and felt like. I was going off of what I read in books. I was going off of what I understood. I didn't have a big ecosystem. I didn't have anyone helping to contextualize that for me. And I certainly didn't have peers that were going through the same sort of situation telling me, hey, that's normal, that's not normal. So having relying strictly on your own experiences, you're just limited to what you've known or what you've figured out or even what you've read. I can tell you that over the years, the more I read, the more I realize there's new things that I don't know. The more I read, the more I'm listening to books that I haven't heard of when my peers bring them up, and it's because I've expanded beyond my own bubble of my own experiences to be in peer groups to where I'm hearing about new things, and those are the things that really help refine me to become more impactful, more value add to my clients or the companies that I'm working within. So all of those things come because I'm expanding beyond my own experience. When I just live based on my experience and I don't have that peer group, I don't have those other sources of data, I'm maybe not seeing the best practices. I'm maybe not getting another opinion on how to do things more effectively. And so I'm limited in the impact that I can have inside my own company because I'm limited in the inputs that I'm taking in to provide that impact. So the right environment really gives you the chance to grow and learn more at an accelerated rate than what you can do on your own.
No, that makes complete sense. So, Brian, you've developed what you call the W3 Development Continuum. What is it and why did you create it?
Well, first of all, what is it? So the Development Continuum, I basically break down integrators into 4 levels. And this is within W3, 4 levels that comprise how you get from just getting started, which is important, all the way to the level of being what I'll call an expert, but to me, an expert is really like a train the trainer. They are they understand it. They can teach somebody. They can actually, a train the trainer can actually make another train the trainer because they can get somebody to the same level that they're at. How they look and develop is going to look a little different. But so what I've done is I figured out, well, what does it take to have success in the integrator seat inside of an organization? And what are the things that we want somebody to have kind of in their development journey if they're going to take it on in the future? And then how does that grow over time in maturity, in knowledge, in execution, in effectiveness? All of those things are important. And so you can take that and you can put that kind of methodology up against the accountabilities, the thing that an integrator does. And you can kind of figure out, well, what does progression look like? First of all, I think anyone in the EOS world would tell you have to be a core values fit for the organization that you're a part of. And you have to get, want, and have the capacity to do the job of an integrator. But I have this, what I call the pre-integrator stage. And I'm going to say this is somebody that is a proven leader and they get, want, and have capacity to do the integrator role. However, they might be more exhibiting the potential than fully being ready to step into that role. So I'm going to call that whole category emerging integrator. And I love that category because we can actually push people into this zone where they can be an emerging integrator. They can be learning about the role. They can be being mentored. They can, all this wonderful thing can go into these emerging integrators. All this wonderful development can go into those emerging integrators. They can do self-development. And this is going to help them move along and be ready to take on that first integrator assignment. They might be in an assignment below the emerging level in a leadership team seat or something like that, but they're just growing into that integrator capacity, and eventually they should be able to fully take it on. So that's the very first level. The next level would be a developing integrator. And I distinguish that because emerging, they're not truly a full integrator yet. They might be doing some integrator types of duties. They might be supporting. They might be an assisting integrator. But the next level is developing. They're in an integrator seat, right? They're in an integrator seat. However, they may need some active and consistent coaching, maybe at a higher level, to be able to perform at their and they need a peer group and good reading topics to focus on their gaps in order to develop and shore up their experience. So developing means you're in the seat, you're actually doing integrator work, but you're not necessarily fully independent yet. You need that external support to execute on your own. The next level would be the proficient level. And at proficient, it's exactly what it sounds like. This is somebody that basically think they can execute on their own. Doesn't mean they shouldn't get coaching. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have a peer group. But they need less input in order to do the job. They need less overall support in order to make consistently solid decisions to help drive the effectiveness of the organization. And then the last, some people may get to that level and find that that's exactly where they want to stay. They just want to be independent, do their thing. They're going to read every now and then. They're not necessarily trying to train and develop other folks. But for those that truly want to master their craft, they're going to do that through that really growth mindset and really hyper focus on learning and development. And they're going to try and ascend to that train the trainer level where they can make people all the way up to the same level they're at. So they're at proficient, they're still learning and actively developing themselves, growing, and they're teaching that. They're passing it on to other integrators to help them grow. That's the continuum: emerging, developing, proficient, expert. And if you can imagine that as a progression, that can give someone an entire roadmap to get from where they are now to where they need to be. And as we overlay that on top of our skills or our experience matrix that we've talked about in the past, where we have entrepreneurial leadership on one axis and EOS and integrator fluency on the other axis, we can figure out where someone comes in, we can figure out where they want to go, and we can put together an individualized plan to get them from point A to point B.
No, that makes perfect sense. So how does understanding where someone is on the development continuum help them grow it more intentionally?
I think so we're humans and we have blind spots, right? So
100%.
We're going to be, that said, a lot of us can probably do some pretty good self-analysis of where we are and where we aren't, but there's still going to be things that we think are true about ourselves that aren't, and things that we don't realize are true and we don't recognize. So, we all inherently have blind spots. So by taking slowing down and looking at, okay, on that matrix of entrepreneurial leadership and EOS fluency, if we can figure out, really plot where our experience lies, and then we can look at, well, why would I say that I'm at this point based on the accountabilities of an integrator? Why do I land at we can do a 0 to 100 scale or something like that. Why do I land at, say, 80 or 90 or 50 or whatever it is? And then we can do the same thing with your understanding of EOS. We can do, we can actually plot where someone is. And once we plot where someone is, we can say, you know what, I'm really strong in these skills. I'm not so strong in these skills. What we want to do, I'm all about putting people in their strengths-based skill set. That said, to be an effective integrator, we want to have a core baseline of skills tied to the integrator, what it takes to be successful in the seat, as well as some things that I think enhance your ability to succeed. So if you can do a good initial assessment, we can figure out where we are. And then if we realize we want to be somewhere that's different than where we are, which is part of the journey. So point A is where we are. Point B is I'm at, let's say, I'm at a 65% on entrepreneurial LMA and a 50% on understanding and being fluent in EOS, but I want to be at 75 or 85% on both of those. Well, I can look at, okay, what else can I do? What else should I do to grow that and to grow this? And then you can start targeting activities. So rather than trying to randomly develop, you can choose the things you read. You can choose the types of extra projects or things you take on specifically to close the gaps in your knowledge and experience to get you to that end state faster.
So, what actually inspired you to create the development continuum, Brian? Where was your motivation behind this?
It basically came from, I think, it currently, as I look around, we hear a lot about in the EOS world, based on the book Rocket Fuel, they talk about this ratio of 4-to-1 visionaries to integrators, right? And we have, so, and of that, we always want to try and find the right integrator to support the visionaries. So if there truly are 4 times more visionaries than integrators, and all these visionaries need integrators, well, I've been a fractional integrator for a few years, and I see some gaps in how integrators are finding their partners and working with visionaries, or visionaries are finding their integrators. And I also recognizing, based on my own experience as a Marine, that and transitioning from the military into the civilian sector and trying to figure out where I belonged, that there's potentially this amazing and untapped pipeline of people from transitioning military, but not solely transitioning military, people transitioning from other career fields, coming back to the workforce, that have the DNA to be great integrators. But they're not today, right? They don't have what it takes today. When I took on my first integrator role, I was not the integrator that I have become. So I'm trying to think like, okay, we have too many people potentially overselling their experience and capabilities, which sets up an expectation mismatch for clients. And we also have a lot of companies that feel like they can't tap into the integrator market because they think it has to be at one level versus another. There's just a lot of misunderstanding about capabilities out in the marketplace. And so when I was designing how W3 is going to run, and again, this is just W3, it doesn't have to, this doesn't apply to the integrators everywhere, but I thought, wouldn't it make sense if we can develop a path, a pipeline that takes people from all the way in that idea stage, like I have the DNA, I might be a great integrator, emerging, right? All the way up to the point where they can be a train the trainer expert. And at that point, it was kind of okay, there's a natural continuum there. How can we define that? How can we explain this to people so that it's easily understandable and people can figure out how they can apply that to their own situation and develop a roadmap to get there. So once I realized I want to try and be able to bring people into an ecosystem. I want to close that 4-to-1 gap by taking people that are inherently capable of becoming great integrators and giving them a roadmap to get there. Well, if it's going to have a roadmap, you got to have some milestones along the way. You have to have some places to stop along the way. And that's how the continuum was born.
So you've been talking about the different stages and the 4 different stages. Why is it important that every stage has value?
Well, each stage has something to offer for both any organization that would want to bring them on board, a company, a visionary that would want to bring an integrator in at any point in their journey. And there's a value to an integrator at every stage having an opportunity to work at that level, right? So first and foremost, I would say from the company standpoint, finding great integrators is tough work, right? And values are really at the foundation of everything we want to do. We want to find a good core values fit. Are they the right person? Do they demonstrate the values of the organization, and will they be able to be accepted and be somebody that's a natural fit within the organization? So values is first, but beyond that, somebody that can get, want, and have the capacity to do the job of an integrator is tough to find. So being able to recognize, even if somebody is a little bit less experienced, depending on the size of the company, some smaller companies and some younger companies might benefit from folks that are a little bit less experienced in the integrator seat, but are getting coached, right?
Okay.
So there's a value there to the company because this makes integrators more accessible. And there's a value there to the integrator because they can potentially take on integrator work at at an earlier point in their continuum. But the thing that makes that all work is the coaching. It's deliberate integrator coaching, specifically focused on helping them perform more effectively and make stronger decisions based on a wider perspective than the integrator themselves. So just because someone's at an earlier stage in the continuum doesn't mean they can't provide value. One of the advantages for the company is this person is less of an expense than a more experienced person. So take that to the next level. Let's say we're going from developing into proficient. Well, at the proficient level, these folks are pretty independent. However, and they're still going to need some coaching, but it's going to be a lot lighter. However, they come with, it is going to be a little bit more expensive to bring them onto the team. So it can be harder to make that make sense in a tight budget when you have a lot of competing interests. And your most experienced people are going to bill at a very some of the best integrators out there bill at a very high rate. It's a fact of life. You can end up spending a lot for fractional support, which has a high ROI if the company can justify that spend to bring this person in. So it's not that they don't provide value. We have to provide value to survive, but not every company, especially younger companies, can afford a top level expert integrator to come in and do what they need. Sometimes having someone at different stages can support the needs of the company as they move up. And so each stage offers something to both the company and to the integrator. The good thing is the integrators start their journey as they're gaining experience. So they go from the emerging to developing to proficient to expert.
So when you're talking about development, and you've mentioned this quite a bit, so from what you've seen, what misconceptions do people have about development?
I've probably said this before, but I think it's worth repeating, and that is that time is development, and
Right.
It's just not the case, right? Development is active. It's focusing on growth. It's focusing on progressing from point A to point B and eventually C to Z. It's actually intentional, and it's designed to help you move things forward. So, that's development is not accidental. Just like I say, winning integrators are not accidental; they're forged.
It's intentional.
Development has to be intentional.
Yep, I love that. So, Brian, tell us how your own journey has shaped the way you think about growth.
Well, I would say I look at things that have accelerated my path and things that I've done more organically. And I don't want to say that I've always been hyper focused on my growth. I would say I've been part of growth-based organizations as a Marine, and I've never not focused on growth, but I've not always hyper focused on growth. Right? I've always wanted to grow. I've always wanted to kind of develop, take on higher levels of leadership, higher growth, or higher levels of leadership, management, responsibility, all those things, both in the Marine Corps, since the Marine Corps. But I would say one thing I learned in the Marine Corps, and I did some, and then I've really kind of done much more since that, is my professional reading and my peer group engagement for learning. As a Marine, there was a fair amount of professional reading that was required, and I definitely hit what was required. But and sometimes I found myself not necessarily going above and beyond and learning from the experiences of others. And I thought I was actually doing decent until I really reflected back years later to what I'm doing now as a business professional. I mean, for I'd say the last 5 to 6 years, I've been, I'll use the word consuming. You could say I'm reading, but I've got some books behind me, but the number of books I take in by audio book as opposed to physical reading is, it's probably 10 to 1. So reading or listening to a lot of professional books. I mean, in the last 5 to 6 years, I've had 300 different business books I've gone through. And because of that, I've realized there's so much more perspective out there to take in and then to be able to share. I'm like, man, if I'd been this much of a voracious learner from the beginning of my career, it would have changed so many different things. But I embrace the fact that I stumbled on this, and I don't want to stop. There's always so much value to the new thing for me to learn that it's very gratifying. So growth is part of my journey, and it's, I believe, one of the unique things that really allows me to relate with my clients in a hyper-focused way. So when they are dealing with a situation, I'm able to take my experience along with some context from some of the learning I've had and really come up with an applicable and relatable way to help them deal with the issue that they're solving and move things forward. So.
Perfect. Great answer. All right, so let's wind this episode up. And if you could just let us know what gives people the confidence once they understand where they are.
I think once somebody can truly understand where they are, I think that is a level of confidence because you're not wondering. And that gives you a chance to then really say, okay, I know this is where I am. This is where I want to be. You can actually put the roadmap together. You can establish some concrete goals. You can envision it. And knowing where you are, it's like knowing the balance on your bank account versus not knowing. Like, hey,
yep.
I've been just kind of spending freely. I think I'm okay, but I'm not sure. You don't know how to make decisions. You don't know how to plan. Once you get a concrete hold on everything that's coming in and going out, then you can actually figure out, okay, what can I do? What do I want to do? What can I put in place? So just knowing where you are gives you a chance to really figure out what that roadmap looks like. And that can inspire a lot of confidence.
Perfect. Well, very well said. Very well said. Well, I'd like to thank everybody once again for joining us on the Integrator Arena Podcast. I know that Brian helps integrators become brilliant in the basics and win.
Absolutely. And at W3, we're on a mission to change companies and lives by transforming proven leaders into winning integrators. So we hope everybody will come check us out and look forward to seeing you on the journey.
Hey, thanks for joining me again. And I look forward to our next conversation, Brian. Take care.
All right. You too.